Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Waiting to rise again.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show. Brought to you by Corks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
This is the moment you've all been waiting for.
Locking down the middle of the day. Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Football Friday, brought to you by Corks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp. Hope your work week is coming to a close. If it has, enjoy. If it hadn't, we'll get you to the finish line here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Jacob Beck, Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos, and we got plenty to do on this Football Friday leading up to LSU and Alabama from Tiger Stadium. Preston Guy will be with us in 15 minutes. Got to set the stage for the NFL weekend to come. Saints Falcons certainly involved there. SEC picks against the spread last week was atrocious. Just an awful performance. Got to own it. Got to get in there, watch the tape. Got to figure out what went wrong. Got to make the corrections. And that's what we'll do top of hour number 2. We got to take it or leave it. Of course, my final pick for Saints Falcons, my final pick for LSU and Alabama. So lock us in. The next 2 hours, we are off and running. Let's do it the same way we do it each and every day. It's the Genesis Opening Drive.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
Look, y'all, I'm fired up. This is oftentimes my favorite day of the year. Because LSU and Alabama is a big freaking deal. There's a reason why yesterday when I was bringing my kid home, there were RVs lined up in the Levy lot. There's a reason why I just left a luncheon where everyone was in purple and gold and we were interviewing former Tigers and nobody was working because it's an awesome weekend on this campus when LSU and Alabama get together. Oftentimes, Friday, a lot more enjoyable than Saturday. Saturday, quite frankly, there's a lot of anxiety, and over the years, there's been a lot of heartbreak on Saturdays with LSU and Alabama. Friday, no heartbreak. Not that much anxiety, just a lot of anticipation and a lot of fun. And that's the way that I'm feeling right now about this game between LSU and Alabama. I wrote a piece earlier this week for LouisianaSports.net where I kind of outlined this recent rivalry. I didn't go back to the 70s with the Bear. I didn't go back to the early 2000s when LSU snapped a bajillion game long home losing streak to Alabama. I didn't even go, honestly, back to last year that much with Jaden Daniels, or 2 years ago with Jaden Daniels and Mason Taylor in the win in overtime. I went back to the two games that LSU fans remember the most fondly in recent memory. And that's, of course, 2011, the game of the century, and 2019, which matched up two phenomenal football teams, the eventual national champions that many call the greatest team in the history of college football, and the team that would win the national championship the next year. The numbers in terms of NFL draft picks from those two games are truly astounding. In 2011, there were 45 NFL draft picks on those rosters. 45. 13 players from the 2011 LSU-Bama games went in the first round of the NFL draft. 13. Then you fast forward to 2019, they had more first-rounders eventually. 19 first-round picks were on the field between LSU and Alabama. There were 11 Crimson Tide players on that 2019 team that would go on to play in the first round. That's a big deal when you start talking about how good that LSU team was. They went to Tuscaloosa and absolutely, totally and completely, I don't even want to hear from any Alabama fans with any dissenting opinions whatsoever. LSU start to finish owned that game. Alabama ran a punt back. Derek Stingley was looking at the sideline for a long Devontae Smith touchdown. Like, those count, and I'm not going to take them off the scoreboard. But if you look for man-on-man, line of scrimmage on line of scrimmage, quarterback on quarterback, LSU beat the absolute brakes off of Alabama that day, and that Alabama team ended up putting 11 players in the first round of the NFL draft. And they won the national championship the next year. And oh, by the way, Joe Burrow won the Heisman that year, and Devontae Smith won the Heisman next year. There were two Heisman Trophy winners on the field that day, and they didn't have a shabby day. 5 touchdowns and 670 yards, those two combined for. And you watch this game year after year after year with NFL players littered all over the field, national championship implications in the air, two of the most iconic brands and uniforms and stadiums in the sport. It was an epic decade and a half. Now, it was one-sided, and I'm pointing out the 2 wins. There was a lot more heartbreak. We can talk about 2012. We can talk about that matchup when Leonard Fournette went in there riding high in 2015 and got shut down, and Derrick Henry stole the Heisman from him. You can talk about basically almost a decade from the 2012 January game through 2018 where LSU didn't win a game. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't one of the spectacles of the sport. How often does game day show up here? A lot. Where do these 2 teams always put their bye weeks? Right in front of it. CBS was flexing 1 game a year into prime time. This one, almost every year. And while you would still look at an Alabama fan and say, who's your most hated rival? And probably 7 of them would say Auburn and 3 would say Tennessee. And I don't think any of them would say LSU. But that doesn't take away from how great this rivalry has been in the landscape of college football, really since 2007. And tomorrow we'll go inside Tiger Stadium and Nick Saban's not going to be there. And those first-round draft picks that I rattled off are not going to be matched. And quite honestly, I don't think either one of these teams is winning the national championship. I do think one of these teams is going to have a chance to play for it. And that is a big freaking deal. This is a big game for both of these teams. Kalen DeBoer losing 3 games on November the 9th in Tuscaloosa is a disaster. Brian Kelly falling for the 3rd time this year in year 3 is short of where many people thought this program would be when he took over, even in the disrepair the program was in. Somebody is walking out of that stadium feeling like, we got a chance. We're in this thing. We're playing better. Somebody's walking out going, this is not going to be a fun last month. Our goals are out the window. My fan base is not going to be very happy about that. Like, those stakes are huge. And I gave a similar conversation entering the USC game. I gave a similar conversation entering the Ole Miss game. And I gave a similar conversation entering Texas A&M. But you realize that now with those games in the rearview mirror and with those understanding what those results actually meant, tomorrow is bigger than those games because of how those games went. Yeah, if LSU takes care of their business against USC and takes care of their business against A&M, this game's still massive, but it's not as big because you have wiggle room. You don't. Yeah, you did. You did great against Ole Miss. That was a huge game, incredible environment, but it just meant you were still set up with a little wiggle room, and then you used all of it in College Station. This game is a big, big deal. I don't want to hear about the fact that there aren't as many first-rounders out there. I don't want to hear about the fact that Nick Saban's not out there. I don't want to hear about the fact that these teams both have 2 losses and neither is in the top 5, which, generally speaking, these teams, somebody, mostly Alabama, sometimes both, is in the top 5. Tomorrow is massive. And I will stand by this. I believe one of these 2 teams is going to make the playoff. And if you do, even if you don't win it, it feels like you've made progress. Kalen DeBoer, year 1. Brian Kelly, year 3. You sell those fan bases in the mental capacity they're in right now a national championship playoff berth, not in the game, but in the playoff. I think it's tolerable. I think some will be very encouraged. Keep in mind, there's a lot of trophies in the trophy cases between these 2 programs. And ultimately, not actually finishing the job feels a little bit empty. But I think progress can be acknowledged. And when you lose to Vanderbilt, ending things on a higher note than that, generally speaking, is a good news. And for LSU, yeah, I wish you wouldn't lose to USC. It looks like they stink. But you get to the playoff, there's something to that. Something to the old Skip Bertman. Like, you got to get there first before you go win it. Tony Vitello might tell you the same thing. Now, Jay Johnson didn't with his LSU team. He had been there previously. But I think this program getting that opportunity would be a very, very positive thing. And I'll be candid with you on this. Like, I have said week after week, I'm going to choose to believe that LSU's got a chance to go to the playoff and play with Penn State and play with Miami and play with Texas or A&M, play with Clemson, play with whoever you want to talk about out of the Big 12, BYU. I think LSU can play with Indiana. I think LSU can play with those teams. I'm not telling you I think they'd beat them every time, but I'm willing to take that shot. And there are flaws on this team, and I wish they ran the ball better, and I wish the defense played better in the second half against USC and in the second half against A&M. And I realize, again, that they don't have 11 first-round picks on this roster right now. But I still think they got a fighting chance. But you've got to get through Alabama tomorrow. And if you don't, there's a lot of questions to be answered, and the air comes completely out of the balloon. Because you can no longer sell 10 wins. You can no longer sell 9 with the bowl game is what I'm talking about there. You can no longer sell high-end bowl game. There is nothing you can sell this program in this city, in this state, around that football program. There's nothing you can sell short of a playoff at this point. Nothing. And that very much holds true at Alabama right now, too. Somebody can't sell that tomorrow. So, yeah. Felt like bigger stakes in 11? Sure. Felt like bigger stakes in 19? Sure. Felt like bigger stakes in 15? Yep. But there are still huge stakes on the line in this game on Saturday. And I'm fired up to be talking about it here for a couple of hours. That's our opening drive presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge. Every car on the lot at Genesis of Baton Rouge is online at genesisofbatonrouge.com. We'll step aside. Preston Guy, TigerBait.com. Continuing the discussion with LSU and Alabama. You're listening to a Friday edition of The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Speaking of Genesis of Baton Rouge, I'll tell you a little bit more about Genesis of Baton Rouge. If you're in the market for a new vehicle and you're kind of thinking about going with a luxury brand, I know there are some that come to mind pretty quickly, and Genesis may not, and that's understandable. They haven't been around as long, and they certainly haven't been around as long in Baton Rouge, only about a year and a half at their current location, Airline and Pico. Give them a shot. Get behind the wheel. Feel the comfort. See the style. Understand the safety. And then understand that it's a reasonable price. Genesis of Baton Rouge is absolutely a luxury brand, and it's absolutely one that you should consider. It's an experience to get behind the wheel of Genesis. And with that experience comes, 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. 3 years complimentary maintenance, complimentary valet maintenance. They come to you. They'll come to you for a test drive as well if you haven't made that purchase yet. If you'd like to, I'm at work, can't get away. Can y'all come out here for 15 minutes and let me see what it's about? They absolutely will. One of those brand ambassadors will drive right up to your office, right up to your front door, and they'll show you what it's about. It's a fantastic line of vehicles, a fantastic operation over there, Airline and Pico. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge. Check them out online, genesisofbatonrouge.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Corks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp.
By Corks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp. You're heading out to tailgate tomorrow for LSU and Bama, or having folks over to the house to watch the game. Corks, always a fantastic catering option. Big trays of crispy fried catfish, big trays of jumbo Gulf shrimp, big trays of crispy shoestring fries, all their honey butter rolls as well. Corks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp. Check them out online, corksfishandshrimp.com. Preston Guy, TigerBait.com. Always good enough. A little bit of his time on a Friday. Joins us now on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Preston, how are we feeling today?
Oh, Hunt, feeling good, especially now that hurricane's heading straight south now.
We like to hear that. That was a little bit of an issue. Maybe a touch of rain tomorrow, but shouldn't be a big weather event in Baton Rouge for LSU and Alabama. How do you feel about the stakes of this game with where the two programs are, where the head coaches are, where their records are, and kind of what you've seen from them this year?
Well, state of the program, I do think LSU's doing fine under Brian Kelly. I mean, a lot of people like to act like, he's lost 1,000 games since he got here. And the truth is he's 26-9 as LSU's head coach and inherited a dumpster fire, and he overachieved his first couple of years here by relying on the transfer portal. And I think that, the program this year, they're going through a change in strategy where they were heavy on the transfer portal the first 2 years. And now they're going toward, okay, let's develop our high school talent. And you have to think about it in terms of him bringing his players in. He's only had 2 full recruiting classes to bring in, right? And we see what's going on in recruiting. So program-wise, I would say Alabama should be a lot more worried than LSU because Kalen DeBoer basically inherited, a Maserati from Nick Saban, an unprecedented streak of success and brand. And it looks kind of shaky here recently. So in terms of where the programs are, I feel pretty good about LSU compared to Alabama right now.
Where's LSU's biggest advantage on Saturday night?
Biggest advantage? Well, I trust the right arm of Garrett Nussmeier a lot more than I trust the right arm of Jalen Milroe. I'll tell you that much. I think the passing game for LSU is, if you need a guy to make a clutch throw, I'm gonna take Nussmeier over Milroe any day of the week.
Are you more concerned with Jalen Milroe in the read option game with those 2 backs, or are you more concerned about Jalen Milroe off script just doing his own thing?
Oh, off script. Yeah, sure, the RPO stuff is scary, especially based on what you did against, Marshall Reed last week. I think that was more of a sign of LSU didn't prepare for it, specifically didn't prepare for it. And in the second half, they just laid it on heavy. You can't tell me that after 2 weeks and, there's no quarterback controversy in Tuscaloosa. They know who their guy is, that they aren't going to be prepared for it. So definitely it's the off-script stuff that scares me with Milroe. Also, weather scares me a little bit because you're talking about, weather. I think you complete 3% less of your passes. You average 50 yards less per game in heavy weather, in rain. Running the ball in general is an advantage when you have weather like that. So you hope it's light rain, and you hope you don't have to win this game by running the ball a ton, because that's advantage Alabama in a big way.
What do you do to combat Milroe off script?
Well, yeah, I think last year the term du jour was get a spy, and I don't know if you need a truly designated spy. I don't even know who on this roster would be up for that challenge, save maybe Major Burns probably be good, but his position doesn't really allow him to be a center fielder with that. But it's really just disciplined football. Like hold your gaps, don't go too far upfield, don't, square up, have some outside contain. Like it really comes down to more coaching of technique rather than coaching scheme, in terms of containing a guy like him. That's at least what I believe.
My concern there is, and I agree with a lot of what you just said about your rushing and staying gap integrity and making sure that you don't get too far up the field and all that. But I do think that the strength of LSU's defense is that pass rush on the edges. It just annihilated Ole Miss. And if you slow that down, how much does that weaken your defense?
A good bit, but it's more so a lot of guys like to go really fast upfield. They're like, okay, I beat the lineman, and they're not accounting for a quarterback stepping up in the pocket and that they lose the discipline. I don't necessarily think that it's about giving up on an aggressive rush. It's just once you've got to a point where you're even with the quarterback, squat down and square a shoulder into him, because you're probably not getting to him by playing Ole. That's more of a undisciplined in general football. I don't think that's a sign of over-aggression. I don't think you have to take your aggression off. I just think you need to come to a point and realize once you're far enough upfield, you've taken yourself out of the play completely, because you're not catching Jalen Milroe from behind. You just aren't. So don't play Ole. Get to where he's at, and if you haven't beat the lineman by then, square up or try to make a move inside. It's just that's one of those things. The defensive line coaching just matters so much.
And they've certainly got a good one in Bo Davis. When you talk about LSU offensively and you look at the Alabama front, how do they compare with Ole Miss and Texas A&M?
Yeah, actually, if you look at the numbers, surprisingly, Alabama's behind them. Now, I tend to not want to look at the numbers, and you look at that roster with Alabama, you know how many 5-stars are on this roster still. In fact, if you look at the 247 team talent rankings, Alabama's number 1 in the country. A lot of people might think Georgia after that mass exodus, but no, on paper, it's Alabama. So I don't want to just sit here and look at the numbers and say, well, they don't compare as strongly as those two, because I'm not overlooking it, particularly given that this LSU offensive line at times has allowed itself to be, manhandled by weaker talent levels, So I think it'll be a lot more comparable than what the numbers suggest. That's just my gut feeling.
I realize there are so many variables that go into this question, but just work with me here. Assuming the game stays tight and nobody gets up or down by 20, which changes your play calling, how many times would you like Garrett Nussmeier to throw the ball in this game?
45. A lot.
45? Okay.
A lot, yeah. I mean, obviously, and if scenarios play into that a ton, I mean, I'm assuming 45, it's a close game, and, you need to go to the end. I mean, in a perfect world, you're winning, and you keep his passes to 30, right? I don't necessarily believe in perfect worlds, especially in this LSU-Alabama series. So, if you're coming into a situation where you need to go win the game late, it's very easy that you could have, 20 passes or something like that in the fourth quarter, something like that to really hype up those numbers. But this LSU team is a passing offense. It just is. Look, if for some reason you catch fire and Caden Durham's lighting it up, running the game, yeah, sure, run the ball 30-plus times. But I really do think this is going to be like a 65-35 pass run team.
And that's okay, as long as you don't get too out of whack like they did in the second half against Texas A&M.
Yeah.
I was told that Caden Durham is doing much better after 2 weeks off,
Sure.
and so it feels like he's going to be closer to 100% than he has been. How would you handle the running back rotation?
Yeah, I would go Caden Durham until he's tired, basically. I think that a healthy Caden Durham has been head and shoulders above the other guys this year. And then, when he's tired, when he's running at 85% speed or whatever, is a step back, let's get Josh Williams in there. You know what I mean? And I would go heavy-handed with those. Of course, Frank will probably, go deeper than that. But I personally don't think if you're not going to run the ball 30-plus times a game, I don't know that there's really a big reason to rotate in 4 and 5 running backs. What are they tired from? Pass blocking. I think go with your good backs. Use them situationally well, and use those two with a heavy hand. That's my thoughts. But Frank makes a lot more money than me to make that decision.
3 missed field goals in the game against Texas A&M. 2 that were kicked. 1 that was snapped off the face mask of the holder. Are you concerned about the field goal kicking operation?
Well, I would be if that was our sample size. Right. But the fact of the matter is Slade Roy been here a while. You got, Bramos has been here a long time. And certainly there's been special teams mishaps during those guys' tenure. But I don't know that Slade Roy's ever had a bad snap. Maybe 1 or 2 others. But there's a consistent, body of work that these guys are going to get it right. And Ramos he's nothing super special with his leg, particularly leg strength. I don't know that he's made a 50-plus yarder, but, inside 50, guy's been about an 80% kicker, and sometimes that 20% you miss, sometimes they're going to line up back-to-back. And then it was just the second half where everything unraveled for LSU. I don't see that happening again. I think that's a statistical anomaly, and that happens in sports sometimes. So I don't think that Bob Diaco forgot how to coach all of a sudden 1 week, and he's just doing a terrible job with the team moving forward. I think that these guys have been here doing it long enough where I don't see 3 missed kicks happening again, but maybe I'm wrong.
Think LSU wins on Saturday night?
Hunt, it's one of those things looking at these teams. I don't trust Alabama to win this game, and I don't trust LSU to win this game. I really don't. These are 2 very flawed teams, and in fact, I went back and looked at it. I think that this is the worst pair of teams. Like the best team of this rivalry is the worst it's been since 2000, in my opinion. Now there's some 2004 maybe is on the cusp. We'll see how the teams finish out, but I don't trust either team to win this game. What I do trust is Death Valley to show up big where, since 2000, LSU is 1-15-10 Saturday night in Death Valley. And there's only been 1 coach during that stretch with multiple wins against LSU in that stretch. And it's Nick Saban. And guess what? He ain't on the sideline Saturday night. He might be, but he's not coaching on the sideline Saturday night. So
I
will.
Go ahead.
What's that?
Go ahead.
I will take LSU, not because I think they're truly the better team. I think they're both very flawed teams. I just think Tiger Stadium shows up, and that's a tough place to win.
You mentioned the worst combination of the two teams since 2000. There's a common thread in both of those programs since 2000 as well. Nick Saban coached LSU the first part, and then they had those guys run out, and then he coached the Alabama team the rest of the way. So it's certainly a common thread that weaves between them, and he's not there anymore. So we'll see how things shake out tomorrow. Preston, enjoy the day. We'll check you out on Monday for your YouTube show, and we appreciate you joining us.
All right, Hunt, take it easy.
Preston Guy, TigerBait.com, TigerBait's YouTube channel, Monday Night Football every single week. You can follow him there, and you can also check him out here each and every Friday on the Hunt Palmer Show. If you're looking for LSU football content from us, you can always find that on YouTube as well, Hunt on LSU, and of course, LouisianaSports.net, where a lot of you clicked yesterday. We noticed that. It's just funny what a Tiger can do to boost views on the website. And when we come back, we'll get you set up for Sunday's NFL slate. It's the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets. OneBathAndClosets.com is the website. David Duvall and his team, 30 years redesigning and remodeling bathrooms and closets. Safety is a big deal in the bathroom. It can be a hazardous place, especially for those that are getting up in age. If that's you or it's somebody in your life that wants to stay at home but may encounter some hazards in the bathroom, do what you can about it. Try to mitigate that a little bit. They can do non-slip floors. They can do walk-in tubs that make things a little bit more convenient and safer. They can put benches in your shower as well. These are the kind of things David Duvall and his team do all the time, and they are happy to help you make that bathroom a safer place for the loved one in your life. Start that process with a visit to OneBathAndClosets.com. Start with a free consultation there. That part doesn't cost you a cent, and the part that does, you can finance for 18 months, up 0% if you qualify for it. It's One Bath and Closets. Check them out at OneBathAndClosets.com, OneBathAndClosets.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Quirks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp.
Looking up at our screen here, that's on the SEC Network in studio, and Peter Burns and Chris Doring from SEC This Morning are up there, and they got Hester. Hester, two things. One, the superimposed background behind him is all Mike Allstott pictures, which is pretty classic, and his caption is not like 07 national champion or 104.5 ESPN host or Sirius XM. No, it's flag football head coach legend Jacob Hester, which is probably true because when you consider that he's got 4 boys and he's probably coached all of them, that's a lot of games over the course of the last, 16 years or so. I mean, Jack's not that old, but he's been playing for 12 years probably. So you're talking about 12 years of consistent multiple flag football games a week. That's racking up a lot of wins, maybe a lot of losses as well, but he's a legend as it says there on SEC This Morning. Gonna hear some sound from Garrett Nussmeier and Brian Kelly that was pretty fascinating about Garrett Nussmeier's childhood in Tiger Stadium, which did not involve a lot of purple and gold. We'll talk about that to close out hour number 1 here. But let's get you set up for Sunday in the National Football League. Oh, shoot, he says. Guess you don't have the bed ready to go? You just let me know when it's ready to rock, and then we'll redo that part. There it is. All right, we start in Tier 4, which is the bad football, and there are a couple of really bad football games. The Giants are at the Panthers, kind of. They're actually playing the Panthers in Munich. The Giants have lost 4 straight games, which is not good, and they're favored over the Panthers, who are also, you guessed it, not good. However, I have found a silver lining here. I think the European fans are really going to like this game because nobody's going to score, and that's just like soccer where no one ever scores. So they'll be very comfortable watching the Giants and the Panthers. Enjoy that, Munich. The Patriots are at the Bears. This game also stinks. It is Drake May against Caleb Williams. The Patriots have not gained 300 yards in any of their last 7 games. Just for perspective, Tom Brady threw for 300 yards 113 times in his career. So they probably miss him a little bit in New England. That is Tier 4. Tier 3, not great stuff here, but watchable. The Vikings are at the Jaguars. The Vikings lead the NFL with 13 interceptions this year. Trevor Lawrence hasn't played great, but he's also maybe not going to play with a shoulder injury. That means Mac Jones is coming in to face the secondary with the most picks in the NFL. Kind of like the Vikings to go on the road and win that game. The Titans are at the Chargers. The Titans are the league worst against the spread. They are 1-7 ATS this year. Will Levis coming back for them. They do have a good defense, though. They only allow 156 yards per game passing. We've seen Herbert kind of pick it up a little bit over the last couple of weeks. We'll see if he can do that at home against Tennessee. The Jets are at the Cardinals. The Cardinals are a sneaky 5-3. They've won 3 straight games. The Jets have one big issue on their defense. They allow the quarterback to run all over the place. They are the 5th most scramble yards against in the NFL. That's good news for Kyler Murray. That's it for Tier 3. Let's go up to the better football in the NFL, the best of the weekend. That is Tier 2, followed by Tier 1. In Tier 2, the Bills are at the Colts. The Colts are the 4th team in league history to have their first 9 games decided by 1 score. I found that interesting. Tough news for Buffalo. Sounds like Amari Cooper probably out. Keon Coleman may be out. That's tough for them from a wide receiver core, but Josh Allen's played at an MVP level. Think he'll be fine in Indianapolis. Broncos are at the Chiefs, a division game. Broncos are 0-3 against the spread against teams with winning records. They haven't done well there. Last year against Denver, Mahomes really struggled. He got sacked 5 times in 2 games. He was picked off 3 more times in those 2 games, and the Chiefs only scored 28 total. That's a good Denver defense. Don't know if they're going to go to Arrowhead and win, though. The Broncos...
They got blown out last week.
Yeah, they're still a pretty good defense, but I don't like them against the Chiefs, that's for sure.
I think they are a solid defense, but at the same time, their schedule hasn't been exactly a murderer's row.
They're bullies, that's for sure. 49ers are at the Bucs. Christian McCaffrey coming back in this game. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have the 3rd highest blitz rate in the NFL. Brock Purdy is 32nd in the NFL against the blitz. I think they're going to turn up the heat in Tampa. 49ers just kind of limping along. Maybe McCaffrey gives them a shot in the old arm. This is probably a Tier 3 game, and I put it in Tier 2 because it's a great rivalry. The Eagles are at the Cowboys. How about this? Saquon Barkley against Dallas in his career. 0-10. Now, all that was in New York. The Cowboys are also 17-1 in home divisional games since 2018. They've won 10 of those in a row. Now it's time for Cooper Rush to come in. You would think, well, that's a disaster. Cooper Rush is 5-1 as Dak's backup. So all that kind of tends to lean towards the Cowboys. Give me the Eagles. I think they go to Dallas and win that game. Tier 1, best football of the weekend. There are 2 games in this category. The Steelers are at the Commanders. The Steelers are 8th in the NFL in rushing, and Washington's been bad against the run. However, Washington, behind Jaden Daniels, has not turned the ball over in 4 straight games. That's the longest streak in that franchise's history since they started keeping the stat in 1933. Jaden does a pretty good job of taking care of that football. We'll see if he can do it at home against Pittsburgh. It would be a big, big win for Washington. And then the last game, Tier 1, Lions and Texans from Houston. It's Sunday Night Football. Texans are 6-3 overall, but they're 1-2 against teams that have a winning record. This is kind of a prove-me spot at home for Houston. The Texans have been outscored 75-52 in those 3 games against the winning teams. The Lions lead the league in points per game and point differential. I think they're the best team in the National Football League at this point. That'll be a good one on Sunday night. C.J. Stroud against Jared Goff and the Lions. That's it for our look through the National Football League. I'm excited for Steelers and Commanders there, Beck. I think that's a big spot for Jaden and company.
I was waiting for the music then.
There it is.
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing.
Yep, as usual. I agree with you. I'm interested in that Texans game. Like you said, that they've kind of struggled. They went over the Bills earlier in the season, but other than that, they've kind of struggled a little bit. They're also 1-2 in their last 3 games.
I've got a point on Houston for Saints fans that want to hear me talk about Saints and Falcons. I will, but Hanny wrote a great column for LouisianaSports.net that is actually up right now. You can go check out. It's under the Saints. He looked at the rebuild that Houston underwent, and it started in a really bad spot with coaching turnover multiple consecutive years, ownership trying to figure things out, bad salary cap situation, bad quarterback situation that was a veteran, and they revamped the whole thing in 2 years. Now they've got a good team. They've got a good young coach. They've got draft picks to play with, a quarterback that's established, and they're significantly under the salary cap to go add to that. They've done an amazing job in Houston, and it came from a terrible situation. So if you'd like to kind of read about that, and he goes through all the steps, ownership, coaches, GMs, draft picks, who they traded, who they picked, what round, all this kind of stuff. It was really fascinating to go in and read, and it parallels with the Saints, who are now going to have to do all that, tear it down, get rid of bad contracts, move on from Derek Carr eventually whenever that happens. and then find your next quarterback. And Houston, it appears, in a really good spot right now. Doesn't mean they're going to play well against the Lions, but they're in a pretty good spot as an organization because they went and got Stingley. They went and got Will Anderson. They got Henry Toto. They drafted Nico Collins, and they picked up C.J. Stroud, and it was fortunate, but you need some fortune. You need the Panthers to screw up and taste Bryce Young so you can take C.J. Stroud. And I thought it was an interesting read over there at LouisianaSports.net. Am I giving the Eagles and Cowboys too much credit in Tier 2 with Cooper Rush playing?
Yeah, I think so, man. The Cowboys have been disastrous, even with Dak Prescott playing.
Yes.
So I wouldn't expect too much from Cooper Rush, but the Eagles they're 6-2, but they haven't looked super impressive in some of their games against better opponents. They got blown out by the Bucs. They lost a close one to the Falcons. I mean, they
went to New Orleans.
Yeah, they
beat the
did.
Saints,
they
baby.
did, and by a field goal. And
Although
then,
I did talk to a buddy of mine. He's actually married to one of my wife's really close friends, and we were chatting last Sunday. And he was at the Eagles game as a season ticket holder, diehard Saints fan. He went to all the COVID games. Like he's way in. And he was like, that Philly game felt like a primetime Breeze era game in terms of the environment. Like it was fired up in there.
Yeah.
And at that point, everybody was fired up.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm proud of you, Beck. I got to tell you why.
Okay.
Because I made a disparaging remark about soccer in that segment, and you did not grab the microphone and yell at me. That is a lot of restraint.
The reason why is because I literally didn't hear you because I was working I was doing some other stuff for later
Would you
in
like
the show.
me to remake the remark so you can hear it?
Yeah, sure.
So I said that the Giants and Panthers are playing in Munich.
I did hear you say that, but I didn't hear what you said about it.
Yeah, I said that they're playing in Munich, which should make all the European fans very, very comfortable because no one's going to score in that game,
That's
and
true.
no one scores in the sport they go watch either. So they should feel really comfortable.
Yeah, well, that's actually not. I mean,
They're going to be super pumped when some team kicks 2 field goals and has 6 points.
Yeah, all the kicking. They're going to enjoy all the field goals for sure.
The punts.
Yeah, the punts, the kicking.
Wow.
That's going to be good for them.
Shout out Munich. That should be a heck of a time there for Giants and Panthers. I
wonder how many people are going to be in that stadium. I mean, the Allianz Arena is one of the bigger ones in Germany, but I think it only holds like maybe 60,000. So there may be like 20,000.
I will never know because I will not watch one snap of that football game. I can promise.
You're not going to wake up at 8:30 to watch it, Hunt?
No. I don't know when I'll be up. These night home football games, I don't finish my column until like 2 a.m. And generally speaking, my wife, or in this case, potentially my parents, will be taking care of the little guy when he gets up at 7. So I'll probably be up at 8:30, but we're not turning that on. We're gonna either be chatting about the game from last night or cooking breakfast or something. We won't be glued to Giants and Panthers. Let's take a time out. Close out hour number 1.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Audio Video Security Solutions, avssla.com is the website. Go check them out. They got an incredible line of services. And quite frankly, if you're like me, and I think a lot of you probably are, many of you are not, but I think a lot of you are like me, you're just not really sure what you can do from an audio or video perspective. You're not really sure what the capabilities might be. And that's where Audio Video Security Solutions comes in. They made it so easy for us. Mitchell Fisher and his team came to our house when we were moving in and said, okay, well, this is some of the things that we can do. And they kind of laid it out for us. And I was like, yeah, that sounds really good. I mean, can I figure all this out? And he's like, yeah. He's got this panel right outside right next to my back door where I can literally push one of the buttons on there and 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge just pops on the outdoor speaker. That's pretty easy. I can handle that. I can work that. I also didn't know that capability existed. If you're looking for something like that, looking for them to mount your television, set up your surround sound, make your home entertainment system a better quality product, they can do it at Audio Video Security Solutions. Our Instagram feed is awesome, AVSS_BR, and always invite you to call Mitchell Fisher on his cell phone. He's the owner of the company. He'll take your call, 225-439-7920. Audio Video Security Solutions, online at avssla.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Quirks, Cajun fried fish and shrimp.
Wrapping up hour number 1 here, Football Friday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show, presented by Quartz, Cajun fried fish and shrimp. I got a story up this morning at LouisianaSports.net. Kind of details this interaction we had with Garrett Nussmeier earlier this week at player interviews that I got a kick out of. Keep in mind, Garrett Nussmeier moved all over the country when he was young because his dad, a football coach, was getting different jobs all over the country. He was there at Washington with Jake Locker. He was at Michigan State with Drew Stanton. He was in Tuscaloosa with A.J. McCarron. He was in Florida when Florida was coached by Jim McElwain. he moved all over the place, and he obviously pulled for whoever dad was coaching. So he gave some stories about early in his life, this first one when he was just 10 years old, about pulling against LSU in Tiger Stadium. And still to this day, while he is LSU's starting quarterback, been on campus for 4 years, refers to the other team as we. This is Garrett Nussmeier talking about the devastating 2012 LSU loss to Alabama, where he was in the stadium pulling for the Tide.
I mean, obviously, yeah, I've told many people before I have some really good Alabama memories. I was there when we won the national championship in 2012. I got to be on the field, confetti falling, holding the trophy, with my family. That was a pretty cool moment for me, and the national championship parade and things like that. There was definitely some core moments for me growing up watching A.J. McCarron. That was one of my favorite players of all time, and just watching him, I idolized him at a young age, and I'd always idolized my dad's quarterbacks. When we were at Washington, Jake Locker, and in Michigan State, it was Drew Stanton, and Alabama, it was A.J., and there's other guys, throughout his career that I always idolized. And in Death Valley, I can remember a time, I can't remember what year it was. I think it was the national championship year. I remember we were down late in the game. We were up big in the first half. I can remember LSU started coming back in the second half. It's weird talking about this because now I'm talking like I'm on the Alabama side, which I hate. But I can remember, LSU came back and we had the ball. One of the last plays of the game, we ran a little slip screen to T.J. Yeldon. Yeah, took it 45 yards for a touchdown. I remember going crazy, taking off my hat, jumping around, and it was a pretty cool moment. Death Valley, obviously, it was one of my first experiences, realizing how loud it was. And so that was definitely a cool one for me. Now I've seen both sides of this rivalry. Obviously, I'm very thankful that I'm on the right side now.
Thankfully, he's on the right side now, but it's still got to sting a little bit to hear your starting quarterback call Alabama we, and how he was going nuts when TJ yelled. That was one of the worst moments of my Tiger Stadium life when I was down there on the field for that game. But that actually wasn't the only game he talked about. His dad was at Florida in 2016. You remember the Hurricane Matthew game that got postponed back to the second to last week of the season, and Florida came in here and beat LSU. And Nussmeier, who was 4 years older at that time, 14 years old, talked about his memory of that one.
Even as a 12-year-old, I knew, we were playing LSU was a big deal. And so I definitely, I could say when I was at the University of Florida, there I was 9th grade, 8th grade year, I can remember coming here to the Swamp, and, I understood kind of more at that time. And I remember we were playing for if we won the game, we won the East. If we lost, we didn't make it. And I can remember Darius Geis get stuffed at the 1-yard line to win the game. And that was a pretty cool moment for me and my family as well. That's one that I remember the implications.
So he's a little bit older then. But again, I'm sitting here listening to him say this, and I was like, God, that sucked too. And you were so happy. This is terrible. But y'all remember the drama around that game with the Hurricane and with Jim McElwain, and it was Ed Ogeron as the interim, and LSU had a chance to go to the Sugar Bowl, and you felt like that was O's kind of chance to stay on as the head coach potentially if he could have won that game. And then Darius went the wrong way and got stonewalled at the 1-yard line down there in the south end zone, and it didn't go LSU's way. And it was bizarre to hear Nussmeier use we when talking about it. And he clarified, it was like, it's so weird to hear me say that, as Alabama. I hate that. But that was his life growing up. And he mentioned a few other things, but I thought this was a really funny back and forth as well, because Nussmeier said over the course of that one of the things that he remembers about Alabama is when he and his dad were on the field in Miami when Alabama won the national championship and all the confetti was falling and he got to hold the trophy and all that. And you got to keep in mind the head coach that they beat in that game was Brian Kelly at Notre Dame. And so Brian Kelly the next day on the SEC teleconference was asked, does Garrett ever bring up the fact that he beat you as a 10-year-old in the national championship game, the biggest game you've ever coached in? And this is what Brian Kelly had to say about that.
Yeah, he's brought it up, and I told him to shut up and not to bring it up again, because the next time we're going to be on the field together, we're going to be holding it together. So we had a little bit of a laugh about it, and then he was good-natured about it, and he wants the same thing, right? I mean, he's looking forward to doing that here at LSU.
I'm guessing that was you with the high-pitched chuckle there after you said that?
I was recording the teleconference there on the old recording device, and I thought that was funny answers. so I chuckled. But yeah, that's It's just so funny how football weaves itself like that. And Garrett had another anecdote. I didn't want to play the whole sound, but he talked about how his mom's family, which is very, very much rooted in Southwest Louisiana, very, very much pro LSU. When Doug Nussmeier would coach against LSU, they would want to come to the game, but they would all wear, black shirts. And then Garrett said that sometimes they would wear purple and gold. And his dad was on the other team, and he thought that was ridiculous because it was family, and he was a young guy. He didn't understand why his aunts and uncles were cheering against his dad. But it all works out, and now Garrett is in purple and gold, and we'll play Alabama tomorrow and kind of a come full circle type of deal with a lot of stakes on the line. So I thought that was a pretty cool anecdote. I wrote about it on LouisianaSports.net if you want to read that story, but we also had the sound there as well. I thought it was a good story, and it's just an interesting how folks grow up. And so Garrett had his mom's side that was all LSU, and then his dad that was just a different hat to wear almost every year. And now his dad, of course, is in the NFL, and so it's all purple and gold in the Nussmeier clan these days. That'll do it for hour number 1 here on a Football Friday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. If you missed any of it, catch it on demand. 1045ESPN.com's on demand tab, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, wherever you find your sound, you can always find us. Just search Hunt Palmer Show. Like, subscribe, rate, and review. All our LSU football content is there at Hunt on LSU. All of our Saints content is there at Hunt on Saints. I appreciate you finding that and sharing it to your friends and family, so we can get our content in front of as many people as possible. We're going to step aside for SportsCenter. Still plenty to do in hour number 2. I've got to rebound. I've got to find a way, somehow, some way, to rebound from last week's atrocious SEC picks. We will do that. We will talk Saints and Falcons. We will play Take It or Leave It. My final pick for both South Louisiana football games coming up this weekend. Don't go anywhere. It's a Football Friday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Got to make LeBear's Baton Rouge your game day headquarters this season. They've got huge screens. They got fantastic food, great drink specials. No better place in Baton Rouge to watch the game than ESPN Bet there in LeBear's. In addition to that, I always tell you about the Cover 5 SEC contest. You're too late, probably, to make real hay in the season-long contest. Let's just be candid about that. But there are weekly prizes that can be won if you compete against me. You got to put the promo code in LABRSEC24. That's LABRSEC24 in that Cover 5 app, and you can compete against me. Pick 5 SEC games against the spread and see how you do. My last few weeks haven't been that great, but there's always another week, and there is this week. If you're not a member, you can get the Pin Play app today. LeBear's Baton Rouge is your live sports headquarters. You got to be 21 years or older. If you have a gambling problem, you got to call 1-800-589-9966 for help.